Welcome to God We Trusted. I'm your host, Will. I'm here alongside Sam. Sam, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to be talking about one of the world's major religions, and that is Islam. If you were to look and go around and ask, most people do not know much about Islam. In 2015, the Public Religion Research Institute found that 83% of Americans confess that they know little at all about Islamic beliefs or practices. In 2024, the University of Maryland did a study, and it found that 73% of adults under the age of 30 have a favorable view of Islam. And so in today's episode, there's lots of misconceptions about what Islam is, what it isn't. And I want to come at it from a perspective that says, let's look at their holy writings, right? Let's go to the Qur'an, the Hadith, to understand what is it at the foundation of this religion that they believe at their core.
Yeah, we want to do, the objective is to let their words speak for themselves.
That's right. Because whether we like it or not, this is becoming more and more of a prevalent issue in our world, right? From between 2010 and 2020, the number of Muslims worldwide grew 347 million to 2 billion people today. On the other side, Christians grew 122 million to 2.3 billion people. And the Pew Research Center that studies all this, and as a Christian, this is alarming to me. They said this, direct quote from their study. They said, in the next half century or so, Christianity's long reign as the world's largest religion may come to an end. Indeed, Muslims will grow more than twice as fast as the overall world population between 2015 and 2060. And in the second half of this century, so in our kids' lifetimes, it will surpass Christians as the world's largest religious group. So one, I don't love that because I'm a Christian and I love Jesus and I want people to know Jesus, right? That's first and foremost thinking about the kingdom to come. But beyond that, if Islam becomes the dominant worldview that at bottom people hold as the highest view of beauty and truth, and this is the example and the model on which all of civilization is going to be based, if they step into the driver's seat of how to run culture, we should know, we should do the due diligence of knowing what is it, not that you see, because I don't want to look at Muslims in general or fringe groups or whatever. What is it that their prophet, who they hold as the highest example, what is it that their Quran and their Hadith, what is it that they teach? What at bottom is at the base of this worldview? Because that's going to be the world that our children inherit. And so that's what I want to do today, is look, what do they teach? What do we find in the life of Muhammad, who is held up as the example for all Muslims?
Okay, so where do we begin?
I think one of the good places to start is to acknowledge that all around the world, there's 2 billion Muslims who believe radically different things, depending on who you talk to, right? Like there are wonderful Muslims, and there are parts of the Quran that lift up hospitality and family and the importance of prayer and drawing near and being quiet and doing all of those things. And they emphasize peace in a lot of those cultures, right? But then you have other parts of the world where it lifts up violence and conquest and the treatment of women is utterly appalling. And you're like, how in the world can the same religion produce such radically diverse people groups and the ways that they live? And the reality is when you study the Quran, that's exactly what you find, is there is a great diversity of peace and hospitality and prayer and all of those introspective kind of things. And yet you also find these verses in the Quran that call for conquest, that talk about women in demeaning ways. And so you can see how you get very diverse groups. And so what I want to do today is to discuss the life of Muhammad. So first off, Muhammad is coming into the stage of history in the 600s. So 600 years after Jesus, Muhammad comes along. He's going to be somebody who says that the Torah of the Jews, well, this is inspired, right? This is inspired by Allah. The gospel is inspired. He tries to co-opt that and say, but all of that was pointing to me. I am the great prophet that was promised. I am the final prophet. And so I am the example. And so let me start by saying we're going to go through, in their own words, all of this stuff. And I don't want to examine Islam based on the people. Okay. Let's look at Muhammad. And I'm not an expert, so go check for yourself. We're going to cite the surahs of the Quran, the parts of the Hadith where it says this. And I think, because I know a lot of Muslims, I think there's a lot of them who will be surprised by this. And maybe they just see it as, well, this is the way my family's always been. I'm loyal to my family, so I don't really pay attention to the hard things of Islam. I just put those to the side because this is who I am. This is my culture. This is what I'm loyal to. And so I want to appeal, one, to the people who are hearing this that don't know anything about Islam, to remember to love the person. Yeah. We're called to tear down strongholds and arguments, not people, right? Mm-hmm. But then also to the Muslim who might be watching this, contend for truth.
Yeah.
Like really stop for a moment and ponder, like, is this what I want to base my eternal life upon? Do I really believe that this is true? Do I really believe that this prophet was sent by the Most High God to lead me in the ways of truth and beauty? And I think most people, when they hear the story of and the life of Muhammad, would come away saying, there's something wrong here.
And starting just kind of with the background, like Christianity, we come to the Bible, and that's our authoritative text. When we're coming into the world of Islam, kind of set us up for what we're going to be looking at.
Yeah, so there's different branches of Islam. The biggest one that we're going to be looking at is Sunni Islam, which is the overwhelming majority of Muslims around the world are Sunni Islam. And they would say, here are our sources of authority. We have the Qur'an, which is the word of Allah given to Gabriel to Muhammad that's recited out, and those are absolutely authoritative. Then under that, you have another authority, which is called Hadith. And you have two that are called the Sahih Hadith, which they're authentic, they're authoritative. And then you have 6 canonical Hadiths, which are different books that are telling the life and actions of Muhammad. And then beyond that, you have non-canonical hadith that's telling about stories of Muhammad and might be true or not, but they don't hold it as authoritative. The teaching of revered imams through history, cultural traditions, the early biographies. And so let's just look at what they are, the big authoritative ones first. The Quran is the supreme authority. It was supposedly given to Muhammad by the angel Gabriel, who appeared to him between 610 and 632 AD.
Okay.
There's 114 chapters in this thing. The chapters are called surahs. And so the entire Quran is way shorter than the Bible. Okay. It would be like take the 4 Gospels, add the book of Acts, and that's going to be about the size of the Quran. It's totally authoritative, right? So then the Hadith come, and they're the actions and sayings of Muhammad, which is important because the Quran says that the messenger of God, meaning Muhammad, is an excellent model.
So what he says should apply.
What he says, what he does is the standard. So it's like, watch Muhammad, what he does, and it's almost like the law to you. You are to replicate him because he is the excellent model according to the Quran. And so for them, you look to Muhammad to obey the messenger. You settle all disputes by looking at his life. If there's any confusion in the Quran, he is the standard. And so these 6 canonical hadith include Al-Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, I might be pronouncing these wrong, Al-Nasai, and Ibn Majah. And so these all come, and this is problematic, these all come more than 2 centuries after Muhammad dies.
Oh, wow.
So starting in 850, which is the earliest one, remember, he dies in 632. More than 2 centuries later, you get these people that are like, we need to find out what Muhammad did. So we're going to go around and we're going to collect, sayings of what people said about him. And so these 6 hadiths come together between 850 and 915 AD. And you've got, Bukhari and Muslim, which are the highest. And just to give you an example, the guy Bukhari, which is the most authoritative hadith in Sunni Islam, Muhammad al-Bukhari is born in Uzbekistan, and he decides he's going to compile all of the sayings. So he travels supposedly to Mecca and Medina and Egypt and Syria and Kufa and Baghdad. He gathers 600,000 testimonies.
That's crazy.
According to him, right? 600,000 testimonies about Muhammad, and then took slightly more than 1% of them and put them in his sunnah or hadith,
okay, so he
right?
edited it down.
That's right. And so this is where Sharia law comes. And it says, we put you, Muhammad, on a clear way. This is Quran 40, Surah 45:18. Muhammad, you are the clear way, the Sharia of the matter. So follow it and do not follow the desires of those who don't know. So where you get Sharia law, what is that? Well, it's the clear way that was given to Muhammad.
Okay.
So Sharia law that is imposed on a society is basically follow the model that was given to Muhammad. So everything becomes Islamic law. No one has authority in Islam, and this, you go back to the Islamic scholars from the 9th century, right? No one has authority to declare anything that's outside of the book of God or the Sunnah, the Hadith of his messenger. So everything has to conform with Islamic law under Sharia. So that's important for later.
And the main point is everything comes back to Muhammad.
That's it. That's correct. Either the revelations given to him through Gabriel
Of his
or
life or his
that's right.
testimonies of his life, but this guy is the center of everything.
That's right. And so for the first bit of his life, none of this stuff is written down. It's not like Gabriel comes to him with, paper and a scroll and says, here's the Quran. Gabriel comes to him supposedly with different messages. Well, in the 7th century, global literacy rates were under 10%. And the World Atlas estimates that in the Arabian Peninsula, only 2% were able to read at this time. Muhammad will never, ever learn to read. He remains illiterate his whole life. And so the Quran, he remembers, and he has his different followers remembering, and they're all holding on by memory to what it is that Muhammad was told. A small fraction of them are written down by people who were literate on wood or pieces of bone, leather stones, cloth, palm leaves, right? And so after Muhammad dies, you have the guy who's called a caliph. And it's like, think of a pope except political. He's going to be like an emperor pope for Muslims, essentially. Okay. Abu Bakr, who's one of his friends, is the first caliph, and he goes on wars of conquest to conquer and bring the world under Islam, which we'll get to later. And so all of the Muslims, he's going into war, and he's got all these Muslims around him who have remembered parts of the Quran, but what happens in war? They start dying.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's this big problem that all the people who know the Quran, and it's all here,
aren't alive,
are dying. And so Umar, who's going to be the caliph after Abu Bakr, who's his counselor, comes to him and says, we really should write this down. Like, we should get these revelations into a book. And so Abu Bakr's like, but Muhammad never commanded that, so how can we do that? Eventually, he's convinced.
He's the model.
Right? He's the model. He never said it, but, it's a good thing. And so he says, we need to compile this. He goes to a scribe, and this scribe says this. This is Bukhari 4986. When he hears that he's got to go collect all these things, he says, by Allah, if they had ordered me to shift one of the mountains, it would not have been heavier for me than this ordering me to collect the Quran. So I said to Abu Bakr, how will I do something which Allah's messenger didn't do? And Abu Bakr's like, by Allah, it's a good project. So I started looking. Now get this. So I started looking for the Quran, collecting it from where it was, written on palm stalks, then white stones, and also from men who knew it by heart, till I found the last verse. Well, there are 6,236 verses. So imagine being this guy, and you're like, all right, who's got that palm leaf? And what do you know? Tell me what you remember. And you're going around, and he's like, this is an impossible project. And so what you get is not Muhammad going, yes, that's it. It's this guy
hoping that it's right.
Hoping that he's found all of them, hoping that the people who've related to them are telling the truth. And so then you get to Bukhari 4987, and you get to the third caliph. So the third kind of emperor pope. That's a terrible way to describe it, but let's go there.
How much time has passed from Muhammad's death to this moment around?
Just decades, just a couple of decades, right? And so Abu Bakr takes control right after Muhammad dies, then Umar right after him, and then the third caliph, whose name is Uthman, that's going to be in Bukhari 4987, decides, you know what? Different versions of the Quran are popping up all over Arabia. Like, there's one over there that says this, there's one over there that says this, so we need to gather them up. I'm ordering all Muslims, give me your Qurans. I'm going to compare them to the original, and then I'm going to burn all the other copies, and then I'll send you back copies of what I approve of. And so all of those various deviations are all burned, and he says, this is the authoritative one. All other fragmentary manuscripts and copies are going to be burned. Well, this becomes a problem, because let me give you some things that the Quran says, right? Surah 15:9 says this. We have, and when it says we in the Quran here, this is talking about Allah is speaking, and it's the royal we, right? Like, it's one person, but it's we, because you're high authority. They did that in the ancient world. We have, without doubt, sent down the message, and we will assuredly guard it from corruption. Well, I mean, it's kind of corrupted. Okay. Surah 6:115, the word of your Lord is complete in its truth and justice. No one can change its words. He is all hearing and the all knowing.
Except for the guys trying to edit it.
Right. Okay. And then, so it's like it can never change. It can never be corrupted. Allah will guard that from happening. And now listen to Surah 106. If we ever abrogate a verse, what does abrogate mean? Replace, repeal, take back, get rid of, right?
So we can make a mistake and fix it.
That's right. So Allah's like, if I ever do take a verse away or cause it to be forgotten, like because it's all memorized, well, if I cause somebody to forget it, which why would you? If it's the perfect Quran and all these verses are perfectly inspired and divine and wonderful, why would Allah cause something to be forgotten? That implies that it was imperfect, right?
Yeah.
And so listen to what he says. We will replace it with a better or similar one, which again, if the Quran is perfect, how do you replace it with a better one?
Yeah, better can't beat best.
You would just repeat what the ultimate divine perfection was, right? But that's not what the Quran says. And so you get this doctrine in Islam called abrogation, which comes from this verse that says Allah replaces the old stuff. And so like in Islam, you find tons of passages in the Quran that talk about peace and all these things with other nations and not imposing your beliefs on others. And you're like, all right, I could be neighbors with that guy. All right, I love this. Abrogation says whatever comes later
Is what was meant.
is better. Right? And so that's where a lot of Muslims will look for the later surahs, the later parts of the Quran, and say that they're superior. And the ones who insist on peace will be like, yeah, but there's more verses that call for this. And then the militant ones will say the later ones said this. So when Muhammad went out, he was over here. And you're going to see as we go in this episode, far more militant, savage, obsessed with global conquest. And so abrogation is a big point because the Quran conflicts itself. Do we have peace with our neighbors? Do we impose our beliefs on others? Because over here it says don't do that, but over here it says you absolutely must, and that's the whole purpose of your existence.
Yeah.
Over here it says be at peace with your neighbors. Over here it says conquer them and put them under submission. Like, which is it? And so abrogation is where they go, sure, the Quran conflicts, but Muhammad taught, Allah taught, abrogation is the way to reconcile this. And so there's a problem there.
And that's kind of opposite of how we use all historical documents. We're trying to get back to the original in every document ever, whether that's, different novels that were written by the ancients, but we're trying to say, okay, what's the original one say? We have all these newer ones, but let's get back to the original one, whereas they're saying like, no, newer is what we're going to take as opposed to older.
That's right. And so it's interesting that Allah's view of truth changes as Muhammad's circumstances change.
It evolves.
Which sounds like a cult, right? All of a sudden I get power and therefore truth changes.
Don't worry what I said yesterday.
That's right. Today. Because now we have all the power. And so let's jump into Muhammad's early life, and we're going to look at some things that are not authoritative in Islam. So you get to some of the historians. The earliest biography of Muhammad was written by a guy named Ibn Ishaq, who wrote in 767, before the Hadith, right?
So 100 years after
140 years after Muhammad. So, but before the Sunnah and the Hadith come around.
Okay.
And so his original works are lost, but then the next historian comes along and copies all his stuff in 820. And so he says, this is what that guy said. And in copying it, listen to what he says. I've omitted things which are disgraceful to discuss, which would cause distress among certain people. So what is he talking about? Because in these histories, there's things about Muhammad where you're like, holy smokes, like that's really disgraceful and distressing. And he's saying, I left some stuff out.
Yeah.
Right? Which you'll see as we go through, like some of Muhammad's character and some of his actions, you're like, this is the prophet that we're to emulate? Well, the historian Al-Tabari, it's the third and final historian that I'm going to bring up. Al-Tabari, super respected, comes along in 923, also quotes heavily from that first biographer.
That was lost.
That's right. Okay. And he says, I only report what's been passed down to me. If anything's objectionable, the fault lies with the source. So he's already like, there's some crazy stuff in here.
Washing his hands.
Don't blame me. So Al-Tabari claims, so this is what's flying around a couple of centuries after Muhammad. He claims that Muhammad's grandfather was commanded when Muhammad was born to give him the name Muhammad, which means praiseworthy.
Okay.
And listen to what they believed was true around the world when Muhammad was born, because it sounds like the myths of a North Korean dictator, right? He says, the palace of the Persian king trembled when Muhammad was born. 14 towers cracked or collapsed. The sacred fire of the Zoroastrian temple was extinguished. Iran's Lake Sawa instantly dried up. Even Hisham wrote that a divine light shone from Muhammad's mother's womb that illuminated the palaces of Busra in the land of Syria. And you're like, yeah, that's likely. Nobody seems to mention it anywhere else in history. But these are the kinds of things that are circulating about the life of Muhammad. He becomes this cultish figure where even the Quran talks about how Muhammad didn't perform great miracles apart from the Quran and a couple of others. But then as his legacy goes into all these other writings that are revered, he becomes this like, towers are shaking and wombs are shining light.
You got to build a man that's bigger than life.
That's right. Because his legacy's otherwise is kind of disturbing.
Well, you want to follow someone, we don't want to follow each other.
That's
You
right.
want to follow someone greater than you.
Mhm.
So that's what they had to do.
So Muhammad has kind of a tragic thing. He becomes a sympathetic figure when he's born. He's born in 570 in Mecca.
Okay.
And his father dies before his birth. His mother died when he was 6. His grandfather died when he was 8. So he has no one to care for him. And from that point forward, he's raised by a wealthy and influential uncle named Abu Talib, who's going to be the father of another very important figure in Islam named Ali, who's going to be the 4th caliph after Muhammad. And he's part of Mecca's most successful and powerful tribe called the Quraysh. Okay, you with me?
Yeah.
So he's born into a city. He's part of the big dominant tribe. His uncle's having to care for him because he's lost everybody. His mom, his dad, and his grandfather. And so Ibn Ishaq wrote that Muhammad was 9 years old when he and his uncle encountered a Christian monk named Bahira in Syria, who claimed that as Muhammad came in as a young boy, 9 years old, that there was a cloud overshadowing him among the people, and the tree branches actually began bending and drooping over the apostle of God. And then Bahira then examined the seal of prophethood between his shoulders. And so you're like, what? And this is, by the way, this is something that is authoritative in Islam.
Okay.
Like, he has the seal of prophethood, and you're like, okay, what's that?
What does that mean? Yeah.
Like, because in Jesus's life, it's like people are like, tell us why you have these authorities. He's doing crazy miracles. He's like, the signs are undeniable, and nobody is able to refute his power to do these things. So what is Muhammad's seal? Because Muhammad holds himself out as a greater prophet than Jesus. What could be the seal of his prophethood? And I'm going to read from different hadith here. All right, so in Muslim, which is Muslim 2346, it says that he had a growth on between his shoulders that had spots on it like moles. And you're like,
we all do.
That makes him a prophet? Well, another one, Bukhari says it was like a button of a tent, Bukhari 5670, or the egg of a partridge, Bukhari 190. It's been described as a protrusion of skin on his back, a bundle of intertwined hairs, a collection of moles on him like warts, a red swelling like the egg of the dove, and also like a clenched fist surrounded by moles. And so all of a sudden, you've got this guy in Syria who's like, look at those moles. You must be the prophet. And like, I looked around and I was like, is there some ancient thing about moles?
Yeah, like, why does this make sense?
I don't know. I don't know, but this is the sign that Muhammad is the prophet, is he has this really weird system of moles that a dermatologist probably could have been helpful with. And yet this is the seal of his prophethood, which I can't make sense of it. So Muhammad grows up and he's a merchant who travels around. He has the one of the very influential ladies who actually proposes to him named Khadijah, who becomes his first and only wife while she's alive. But at age 40, so 610 AD, Muhammad claims that he's up on Mount Hira, and the angel Gabriel comes to him as he's meditating in a cave and gives him the very first recitation from the Qur'an, which is Surah 96. So let's pause here for a moment because that's a confusing thing. Why would the first surah
be 96?
Be 96? I don't know. Like you look at Islamic scholars, there's no rhyme or reason as to how they ordered them.
It's not chronological.
Not at all. And so the scholars had to go and be like, this is when he was in Medina, this is when he was in Mecca, this must have been after that battle. And so they have pretty fairly put together a chronology, but the numbers of the surahs, not at all chronological or even sensible. You have to kind of research when was that written. So Surah 96 says this: recite in the name of your Lord who created man from a clinging clot. Already we're having a problem there because what was man created out of?
Dust.
So here it's like, even though Muhammad's going to claim the Torah is inspired, denies the dust, and now we're made from a clinging clot. Recite, and your Lord is most gracious, who taught by the pen, taught man which he knew not. And so he gets this revelation from Gabriel, comes home to his wife, and Bukhari, the most authoritative of the hadith, says, then Allah's messenger returned with that experience, and the muscles between his neck and shoulder were trembling till he came upon Khadijah, his wife, and said, cover me. And they covered him. And when the state of fear was over, he said to Khadijah, oh, Khadijah, what is wrong with me? I was afraid that something bad might happen to me. And then he told her the story. And she says, we need to go. I think God has visited you. We're going to go visit a Christian relative. And the Christian relative is like, yeah, angels appear to people all the time. So maybe you're his guy. Maybe you're being used. But then Gabriel doesn't come back to Muhammad for a very long time. And Bukhari tells us Allah's messenger was very much grieved. One of the historians, which Muslims would say this is questionable, right? Like we deny that this happened. Al-Tabari writes that he feared being labeled a madman by his own tribe. He suddenly says, I got visited by an angel and now I have a special truth. So he threatened, Quraysh shall never say of me that I'm crazy. I shall take myself to the mountain crag, hurl myself down from it, kill myself, and find relief that way. And in the Quran, you find Allah has to come to him and reassure him that he's not to despair in their accusations. Yeah, all of your people, all of the Quraysh are saying you're crazy. But then Surah 68 in the Quran, starting verse 2 says, by the Lord's grace, you are not afflicted with madness. Right? So out of the gates, you get Muhammad, and there's accusations that he's lost his mind. He's gone mad. He's afraid that he has gone mad. And then he gets Allah, who comes to him through Gabriel again. And it's like, hey.
You're okay.
You're okay. We'll soon see. They too will see which of you is afflicted with madness. And so right here, you see this division between Muhammad and his home tribe, the Quraysh. They are not going to be on the same page for a long time following this.
I just have a question to help me understand. Before Muhammad, when he's 40, getting all these revelations, was there any system of beliefs of Allah?
No.
Okay, so Islam started at his 40 when he started having these revelations.
That's right. So like if you go back, you don't find Allah and other documents. You don't find like Muslims would say, oh, no. The Old Testament and the New Testament were pointing to him. So like in Deuteronomy 18, when God through Moses says, I'm going to raise up a prophet from among your brethren who is like you, they're like, oh, he's talking about Muhammad, clearly.
Okay, interesting.
But that passage is saying, no, he's going to be from your countrymen. And they're like, well, Ishmael was a brother of Isaac, so maybe, and Ishmael's an ancestor of Muhammad. So Deuteronomy 18 was pointing to Muhammad, which is crazy to me. Like, and then you get to the New Testament, and you know where Jesus promises to send a helper?
Yeah.
Oh, that's Muhammad. And they take the gospel language. Well, the problem is when you read the Gospel of John, when Jesus says, I'm going to send you a helper, he names the helper the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So unless you're saying that Muhammad is the Holy Spirit, then that doesn't work. But it's like they desperately try to fit it in because there's nothing that's even remotely. That's correct. That's correct. And it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so, but here's where you get into a bigger problem. Like Muhammad, if from the history, you'd be like, this is Muhammad's first encounter with an angel. He's really traumatized. He comes home shaking. Khadija shaking. He's like, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. But listen to what the Hadith say about Muhammad's childhood. So Muslim 162, which is one of the Hadith, says Muhammad claimed that Gabriel had come to him and confronted him when he was a child already. So Muhammad's already had an encounter with Gabriel when he was a child. And listen to what it says. Gabriel, when he was a kid playing, supposedly, quote, took hold of him and lay him prostrate on the ground and tore open his chest and took out the heart from it and then extracted a blood clot out of it and said, that was the part of Satan in thee. Whoa. I would remember that. Like
be a memorable moment.
If all these other things that the Hadith are mentioning actually happened, why is Muhammad surprised at the age of 40 that Gabriel shows up? Like there's so many inconsistencies here. This idea that an angel finds him and rips open his chest and washes his heart in Zamzam water and everything. It doesn't make sense. But what does make sense to me is Muhammad teaching that in Dawood 47:19 that the devil flows in a man like blood. Muhammad has this obsession that the devil is all around. He taught his followers, he taught his wife that every single person has a devil, a Satan that is attached to him. And they have a little bit of a different view of devils, like demonic realm. They think they can do good and bad. They're called jinn, where we get genie from. But Muhammad says, yeah, I have my own Satan. And he says, Allah helps me against him, so I am safe from his hand. And then listen to this. And he does not command me, but for good. So what is he saying here? I've got my own personal Satan that Allah has assigned to me, but it's okay. He only instructs me
to do good.
To do good. So he's obeying this Satan because that Satan's telling him to do good. Does this sound familiar? Because the Bible comes in 2 Corinthians 11:14 and says things like, Satan is an angel who masquerades as an angel of light, right? Or you look to Galatians, who gives a warning and says, even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be accursed. And so what do you get Muhammad? Muhammad's on a mountain, supposedly, and an angel comes to him and says, that whole gospel of free grace, gone. You don't want to believe that. Paul talked about this. What are you supposed to say to that angel?
Get out of here.
You're cursed. You're trying to add to the gospel. And Muhammad's like, oh, okay, sounds good. If this really happened, this is not an angel. This is demonic presence misleading him. And we're told in 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 1 and 2, listen to this. It's a warning of this. Now, the Spirit expressly says that in the latter times, some will depart from the faith by devoting themselves to deceitful spirits and the teachings of demons through the insincerity of liars whose consciences are seared. Jesus says many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And then you have to stop for a moment. How does the Bible treat false religions? Because it's pretty strong. Like you go to the Old Testament, and when it says, like Moses is warning the Israelites not to offer sacrifices to the idols, you know what he says? He doesn't say don't sacrifice to these fake statues. He says don't sacrifice to demons that were no gods. Deuteronomy 32, 16, 17.
Yeah, they're not neutral.
That's right. And the Psalms, in Psalm 106, verse 36 and 7, you have the psalmist saying that they served their idols and sacrificed their sons and their daughters to demons, not false gods, there's a demonic realm to these false religions. The Apostle Paul claims that what pagans sacrifice, they offer to demons, 1 Corinthians 10:20. In Revelation, the Apostle John claims that idolaters were actually worshiping, take a guess, demons. And so when you look at something like Islam, where you have Muhammad saying, I've been approached by this angelic figure that made me terrified and is teaching me to abandon everything that Jesus in the Old Testament taught, who do you think he was being taught by? I think the Bible makes it crystal clear. And so what is the fruit of it? Because you're going to see the fruit of his life brings a lot of destruction and misery and oppression to the world. And so now we get into the early days of Islam.
And that's interesting because a lot of times we would take something from our Christian perspective, say, well, he's just lying about that. It never happened. It's all made up. Whereas there is an element saying, no, Satan does masquerade as an angel of light.
That's right. And it could be either. It could be that he's on a power trip and makes this up. It could be a mixture of both, right? But there's a very real possibility that this entire thing is demonically influenced. And so in the early days of Islam, here's another thing about Mecca. Mecca has the Kaaba. You know what the Kaaba is?
Is that the black rock?
That's it. So it's the big box that everybody walks around. There's the black rock in it. So Muhammad begins challenging all the polytheists because Mecca is a polytheistic place. The Kaaba, this box, used to house 360 idols. The Qur'an or the Hadith talk about all this, right? And so he's like, you've got to abandon all your 360 idols. It was like the place for all of Arabia to come to because everybody had their God there. And they would come and they would worship and they would do festivals and celebrate. And he says, this has to become a shrine for Allah alone. Well, that's Surah 2:127. Well, if you're in Mecca and this is like a centerpiece of economic trade and why everybody comes to your city and all of a sudden Muhammad's like, you got to get rid of that.
You're like, what?
The Quraysh is like, okay, he's off the reservation. Like he's crazy. And so then he begins urging his followers to shun the abomination of idols, 22:30 in the Quran. He urges the city leaders to remove all the pagan idols from the shrine, which just infuriates them. And so then Muhammad is going to start having some things that set him apart, like the nighttime ride, right? Where this is where he's claiming, to be special and set apart. So he claims that in the night, Gabriel, I think, comes to him and rips open the house. And listen to this, because this is Muslim 163. This is Hadith. The roof of my house was cleft when I was in Mecca, and Gabriel descended and opened my heart. So here he is again, ripping open his chest.
He didn't remember it last time.
Right. And then he washed it with the water of Zamzam. And then he brought a gold basin full of wisdom and faith, and after emptying it into my breast, he closed it up. And then, taking me by the hand, he ascended with me into the heavens. So this whole story, he's in Mecca, near the Kaaba. God comes to him, does all this stuff, puts him on this mythological kind of creature, horse, Baraka is the name, that has the body of like a horse with wings and the head of a face and all this stuff. And he flies from Mecca to Jerusalem. And when he gets to Jerusalem, he goes up into the heavens where he gets to meet the greatest figures of the Old Testament and New Testament, men like Adam, Enoch, Abraham, Joseph, Moses, Aaron, Jesus, and John the Baptist. And when he gets up into heaven on this horse, flying horse, they're all like, oh my goodness, the righteous apostle. And they're all like floored and blown away that they get to be in his presence. And all of the great figures of religious history and redemptive history see him and they're amazed. And then Muhammad's admitted into paradise and he gets to see the Dome of Pearls. And he goes back and tells his followers like, hey, you know, all the greatest historical figures that you think are amazing?
They worship me.
They worship me. They bow down and think not worship me, but they bow down and think I'm the righteous apostle. So if they're bowing down to me, maybe you should too. Right? And it's like, all right, well, let me see where my winged horse takes me. Anyway, so Surah 25:52, you get the heart of Muhammad when he's oppressed, right?
Okay.
Because he's outnumbered by the Quraysh. He doesn't have an army. He doesn't have anybody who's like, I'll take up swords with you. So the early parts of the Quran, the earliest, it's beautiful in a lot of ways, right? It sounds similar to something Jesus would say a lot of times. So Surah 25:52, listen to this. Do not give in to the disbelievers. Strive hard against them with this Quran, not in violence, but hold fast to faith. Surah 41, listen, verse 34. Good and evil cannot be equal. Prophet, so this is Allah through Gabriel speaking to Muhammad, repay evil with what is better. And your enemy will become as close as an old and valued friend. But only those who are steadfast in patience, only those who are blessed with great righteousness will attain to such goodness. So what is the hope of conflict for Muhammad in his early days? You could win them. They'll become as close as an old and valued friend. Be patient, bear with them.
Doing good against evil.
Do good against evil. Repay what is evil with what is good. Like this sounds familiar, right? Mm-hmm. For the Christian. Surah 25:63, the servants of the Lord of mercy are those who walk humbly on the earth and who, when foolish people address them, reply, peace. So what do you say to those who are persecuting you?
Peace.
I wish peace upon you. Gee, I want this. I can handle neighbors like this. This is good. Surah 15, starting in verse 94. So proclaim openly what you have been commanded and ignore the idolaters. We are, Allah speaking, we are enough for you against all those who ridicule your message, who set up another God besides God. They will come to know. You hear the tone of this?
Yeah.
These would be good neighbors. He is the Lord, Surah 73. He is the Lord of the East and West. There is no God but him, so take him as your protector. Patiently endure what they say, ignore them politely, and leave to me those who deny truth and live in luxury. Bear with them for a little while. We have fetters. This is Allah speaking, a blazing fire, food that chokes and agonizing torment in store for them. So vengeance is mine. You just love them. You show patience. You don't go after them. You say peace to them when they ridicule you. This sounds very familiar. That's like Sermon on the Mount-ish, right? It's not going to be that way for long. Wait till Muhammad gets some power. Last one we'll hit. Surah 42, from these early days when he's in Mecca, because this is where the more peaceful, beautiful stuff comes, when he's in a place where he has no power.
Okay.
So let harm be requited by an equal harm, though anyone who forgives and put things right will have his reward from God himself. He does not like those who do wrong. So the greater reward is for those who show mercy and kindness and patience. That's the idea. So then Muhammad's telling everybody, walk away from the idols, the Kaaba, So the Quraysh start getting madder and madder and madder at his followers. And so Muhammad's got some protection. He's got a wealthy uncle. He's married to Khadija. And they're big figures in this culture, right? So nobody messes with Muhammad, but all of his followers start getting persecuted, right? Well, persecution is going to intensify in 619 because in the same year, he loses his uncle, who was his protector, and he loses his wife back when he was monogamous. And it leaves him increasingly vulnerable to persecution. And so like in Surah 8:30, Allah comes and says, remember when the disbelievers plotted to take you captive, kill you, or expel you? They schemed, and so did God against them. He is the best of schemers. And so you get this sense like there's a persecution, and suddenly when you get to 622, Muhammad's like, I'm done with Mecca. And he goes on the Hijrah and he goes to Medina where he's got a faithful following. And it's a multicultural city. There's Jews and Christians and pagans. And he goes there. And 622 facing all this hostility in Mecca. And so when he gets there, he becomes Medina's most influential leader. They're like, this is the guy. We're going to let you lead. He converts a lot of residents to Islam. He already had a pretty good base there. And he drafts the city's new constitution, and it's aimed at coexistence between Muslims and Jews and pagans. And you're like, all right.
Okay.
Surah 2, 256. This is what the Quran said in the early days. Let there be no compulsion in religion, for truth stands out clearly from falsehood.
I'm not going to force anything on
That's
you.
right.
Truth will rise to the top.
Yeah. If you're Jewish, you be happy, be Jewish. We're not going to compel you to change. And if you're Christian, we're not going to put a sword to your throat and say convert. Like, if that's your conscience, Allah is the one who's, in charge of bringing truth from falsehood. It's up to him. And so when he gets there, all of these people from Mecca that are his followers are like, we're out too. And they leave. And the Quraysh are like, well, you left your stuff. It's ours now. Your house, my house. Your stuff was my stuff. You abandon it. Get out of here. Goodbye. And they are super mad at Mecca. So what happens? They're going to Muhammad being like, are you not going to do anything? Are we just supposed to suffer? Nothing ever happens. Like, they don't ever get justice. And this is where you get the first tweak
The turning.
Muhammad. Right. And it's going to be multiple tweaks as we go. So in this one, Muhammad's like, okay, they trade. They have to pass Medina to go up into the Levant, where Israel and Syria and all that is. Well, they're going to be coming back loaded up with money. We'll send out raiding caravans to steal from them. We'll hold them hostage. We'll loot them. We'll plunder them and take their raid. Well, they do this. So Muslim, highest of the hadith, says the messenger of Allah made a raid upon Banu Mustalik. And while they were unaware, and their cattle were having a drink of the water, and he killed those who fought and imprisoned others. Well, he does this during a feast month in Arabia. And everyone's like, you're not allowed to start a war during this. And so all of Arabia gets mad at Muhammad, all of them. And so now they're all on Team Mecca against Muhammad, okay? And the Quran actually records their response. Like, Allah sends Gabriel to come to him, and it says in Surah 22:39, they ask you, Muhammad, about fighting in the prohibited month. Say fighting in that month is a great offense, but to bar others from God's path, to disbelieve in him and prevent access to the sacred mosque, meaning the Kaaba, and expel his people are still greater offenses in God's eyes. Persecution is worse than killing. And so God's like, yeah, we weren't allowed to do that, but what you did was worse, so we did it anyway. And so then you go from endure persecution to retaliation for persecution, and Surah 22 suddenly starts saying things like this. Permission to fight has been granted to those who have been wronged, those who were unjustly expelled from their homes for no other reason than saying Allah is our Lord. And you're kind of like, well, I get that. They're being targeted. Fight back. This is, in some sense, some kind of justice, right? Surah 47:20, those who believe ask why no surah about fighting has been sent down, which means Muhammad's getting a lot of heat for not.
Yeah, why can't we fight back?
That's right. And he says, yet when a decisive surah about fighting is sent down, you can see them sick as heart, looking at you, visibly fainting at the prospect of death, which is better for them. So now Muhammad's like, you better want to fight. Like, here comes the hadith about fighting. Why? Because all of Arabia is starting to get mad at him. And he's like, you better be ready to fight.
There's no other options for
That's
us.
right. Now it's over. So here you have this Muslim war that starts on Mecca. So this massive Meccan caravan's rerouted from its path, because Muhammad's in Medina. They don't want to go through there. They know they're getting targeted with raids. And so this huge caravan's like, they're waiting for us. They send word to Mecca. They're trying to ambush us. So Mecca the Quraysh send 1,000 soldiers to confront Muhammad's 313 Muslim soldiers at Badr, which is their first famous battle. This is where Muhammad's stock goes because they should have been routed. Like 1,000 to 313. And all of a sudden, it's like, wait a minute, like, we shouldn't do well. Listen to what happens. Surah 2, 190 to 192, fight in God's cause against those who fight you, but don't overstep the limits. Okay, there's still boundaries. God doesn't love those who overstep limits. Kill them wherever you encounter them. Drive them out from where they drove you, for persecution's more serious than killing. If they do fight you, kill them. This is what such disbelievers deserve. But if they stop, God is most forgiving and merciful. So there's limitations. This isn't conquest. This is, in a sense, some kind of self-defense still. There's limits.
Yeah, it's fighting for a purpose.
That's right.
This is what we're trying to achieve. Once we achieve it, halt.
But because, not many people want to go out and give their lives, there's an incentive. Surah 8:41 comes and says, know that anything you obtain of war booty, then indeed for Allah, give 1/5 of it to Muhammad to manage for Allah and for the messenger and his near relatives and the orphans and the needy, of course, them, and the stranded traveler, if you've believed in Allah and that which we have sent down our servant. But anyway, they get to keep the rest, right? Surah 47:4, when you meet the disbelievers in battle, strike them in the neck, and once they are defeated, bind any captives firmly. Later, you can release them by grace. You can give them their freedom out of mercy, or you can ransom them, sell them off as slaves until the toil has ended. So you get Allah who comes and says, we are definitely going to win. So Surah 8, Prophet, urge the believers to fight. If there are 20 of you who are steadfast, you'll overcome 200. And 100 of you, if steadfast, will overcome 1,000. So a 10-to-1 ratio, you're guaranteed to win. Allah's got you. For they are people who do not understand. And so they win. And all of a sudden, everybody's like, man, Muhammad, how did you, we had 313, we beat 1,000, we were the underdog. And oh my goodness, Muhammad, you're the best. Da, 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 da. So his stock goes way up. Well, Mecca's not happy. And they go back and they're like, okay, regroup. Next battle, the Meccans march up. This time, they don't come with 1,000, they come with 3,000. And now Muhammad is outnumbered 3-to-1 because now he's got 1,000. But in this battle, 300, what they call hypocrites, people who shrink from the battle out of cowardice, turn back. And Muhammad and his people get routed. And so the two armies meet at the foot of Mount Uhud, and the Muslim armies hold strong, but when the archers abandon their post, they run down to the battlefield to gain the plunder, right? And without the archers, the Meccan cavalry breaks through Muhammad's lines and just smashes them. Muhammad's defeated. He's actually going to get hurt here. Bukhari 29:11, one of their high hadiths, says the face of the prophet was wounded and one of his front teeth was broken and his helmet was smashed over his head. And now, probably this event, more than any other, seems to change the tone of Muhammad. We just faced a loss. Some of my soldiers were cowardly. I've faced a disfiguring injury. And so now, all of a sudden, Allah's truth gets a whole lot more militant. So Surah 3:166, he says, what befell you on the day the two armies met in battle happened with God's permission. This is Allah talking. Gabriel, in order for him to see who are the true believers and who are the hypocrites. Surah 4:145. The hypocrites will be in the lowest depths of hell, and you will find no one to help him. And then all of a sudden, all the promises come for the martyrs. Surah 61. God truly loves those who fight in solid lines for his cause, like a well-compacted wall. Surah 4:74. Whoever fights in Allah's cause, whether they achieve martyrdom or victory, we will honor them with a great reward. Muslim 19:10, one who died but did not fight in the way of Allah, nor did he express any desire or determination for jihad, died the death of a hypocrite, means they're going to hell. Surah 3:175, Muhammad, do not be grieved by those who are quick to disbelieve. They will not harm God in the least. It is God's will that they will have no share in the hereafter. A terrible torment awaits them. So if you're Muhammad, what are you trying to get your people to hear?
It's okay to die.
If you want to die for the cause of Allah, great reward. If you shrink from battle and you don't fight, what's your fate?
Torment
and hell. That becomes the main dividing line of paradise and judgment. Will you fight? Right?
That's helpful for someone trying to build an army.
For sure. Who's outnumbered? Bukhari 28:18. He says, know that paradise is under the shades of swords, which means what?
That's how you achieve it.
That's it.
Via the sword.
Surah 4:95, those believers who stay at home, except those with valid excuses, are not equal to those who strive in the cause of Allah with their wealth and their lives. Listen to the Abu Dawood, another hadith that's canonical, 24:95. An infidel and the one who killed him will never be together in hell. So if you go kill an infidel, what are you guaranteed?
Paradise.
You will never be in hell with him. He's going to hell, but if you kill him, you're guaranteed to never go with him. So what does that incentivize you to do?
Kill.
Go kill infidels, because you're guaranteed heaven. Muslim 1886, all the sins of a shaheed, which is a martyr, are forgiven except debt. So what's your quickest way to get rid of all your past sins and shames?
Martyrdom.
Martyrdom. Go kill. Sign up. So then an Ibn Majah, which is a canonical one, 2799. Listen to the things that are promised to a martyr. He is forgiven. So these are the words of Muhammad. He is forgiven from the first drop of his blood that is shed. He has shown his place in paradise. He has spared the torment of the grave. He is kept safe from the great fright. He is adorned with a garment of faith. He is married to wives from among the wide-eyed houris, which are like, they're described elsewhere in the Quran, beautiful women, basically the virgins. And he is permitted to intercede for 70 of his relatives. So you don't only get to go to heaven, but you get to intercede on behalf of your relatives, and you get wives, and you get plunder, and you get all these other things. So if you live, you get to take from your enemies all the plunder and slaves and wealth and everything else. And if you die, you get it in heaven. Yeah. So everything about Islamic theology changes once he loses a battle, massively. Surah 44:50, those mindful of God will be in a safe place amid gardens and springs, clothed in silk. We shall wed them to maidens with large dark eyes. There they are again, secure and contented. They will call for every kind of fruit. They will just be in luxury. After the one death, they will taste death no more. God will guard them from the torment of hell. And so what do you think happens to the Islamic army now?
Grows.
Oh, it grows fast. Wait a minute. All you want is for me I can get rid of all of my sins just by dying in the cause and killing infidels, and I get plunder or paradise. And so he goes from having 313 in the first battle to having 1,000 in the second battle, to where now all of a sudden he's able to raise an army of 10,000 soldiers, and everything about this movement has been militarized. And from this point forward, where you're going to see Muhammad get utterly vicious and ruthless and hell-bent on conquest, with no mercy, you'll see the tones change radically. And it's not just for the context of the battles he's fighting. He's saying, we're going to expel unbelievers from every place on the whole globe. Everything changes at this point. And you can see, like, if this, I get where he's coming from. He's got a rough childhood. He's facing some rough things. I think he's, demonically influenced here. But you see Allah suddenly begins to change his character based on Muhammad's circumstances.
Yeah, no longer peace.
No peace. And it's don't tolerate their beliefs. And it's not, say peace to, those that are tormenting you. Now it is, if you don't go kill them, you have no place in paradise. And if you do kill them, you'll never share hell with them.
Yeah.
Radically different Islam. So when you're reading the holy sacred text of Islam, you can understand why so many people in Islam are like, well, if you're reading the writings and the sayings that come out of Mecca, you're like, all right.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. It's false. It's made up. Gabriel didn't say these things, and Allah's definitely not the good God. But if you read after this point, you see Allah's true colors of what he's trying to sow on this earth, which is warfare. And by the way, in our next episode, where we get into where Islam goes and the consequences it's had after this, it gets infinitely worse and infinitely more vicious toward those that stand opposed to Islam.
I think this is super interesting because, like, most people walking around, we've heard of Islam. We have a basic premise, but nothing of this depth to say, okay, like, where'd this all start? How'd it come from? How did we get to this place with it?
Yeah. And the thing that, like, when you stop and you think of how absolutely blessed we are to have the God that we serve. He is so radically different than anything that you find in Islam, where, there in the Bible, there are times when God calls for war, right? But it's a time where war is necessary. Islam ends with an ellipsis that says, go conquer it all. It's a perpetual call to war. It's a perpetual call to bring the entire world under submission. It's a perpetual call to martyrdom. Christianity does not have that. Christianity has just war, like where you're protecting righteousness. But think of our Savior. And when Muhammad comes and says, oh, yeah. The Torah was inspired. The gospel was inspired. And it's all consistent with everything that I'm teaching. You're like, no chance. Like, so radically different. These are not, when people say all the religions are the same, that is utter nonsense. We serve a God who loves us so much that he comes down to die for his enemies, to die for those that put him on a cross and tortured him. He comes down and weeps over those that will not submit. He doesn't say, grab your swords, Peter. In fact, he says, put them away. Yeah. Radically different. And so if this is the worldview that is gaining ground all around our globe and about to unseat Christianity, unless things change, the trajectory is not looking great. We need to have the boldness to say what this religion is, that it is not peaceful, that Muhammad was not a peaceful man toward non-Muslims, especially, that he was not a force for peace around the globe, and recognize that when we embrace this worldview, tolerate this worldview, or pretend that it's not what it is, we're doing so to the detriment of future generations that will have to deal with this. And in our next series, in our next couple of episodes, we're going to see that this wasn't just Muhammad.
Yeah.
It continued into the caliphs. It continued for 1,400 years after he died. This never stopped. It never took a decade off. This is Islam.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. And right away, we just want to say our purpose here is not to offend. It's not to belittle. It's not to demean Islam, but it's to say, hey, truth is truth. And we have to say, if they claim that the Qur'an and the Hadiths do carry truth, and we look at the scriptures and they're entirely different, we have to say, hey, there's a glaring issue that needs to be discussed, and we want to do it respectfully via their words. So we hope you join us next time.